As a community, we're witnessing moral trauma through the news, social media, or even sometimes directly experiencing it by becoming ill and isolated from our family and friends. In addition, we're also experiencing a sense of grief at the loss of our close ones in our community. Energy vibrations such as anxiety and fear have overtaken the emotions of many of us in this pandemic. It's tough to always have that positive mindset, even when everyone around is doing their best, urging you to do so. It can all be so overwhelming. What we are experiencing as a community is traumatic stress. And the one thing that I have learned in my journey of self-development is that if we as individuals don't shorten the refractory period of this emotional stress, it is definitely going to affect our physical well-being. So in this episode, I really do hope that Wandamals can contribute to getting you the right support you need in order to improve your emotional well-being. But before we begin, I'd like to first give my highest appreciation to all the Sindhi individuals in our community who have really stepped up in using their platforms and networks to provide endless support to those seeking medical resources in this time. I hope that the actions of these brilliant individuals can be a wake-up call to our community leaders and associations to step up to give the reassurance and support our community needs during this time. My eternal gratitude goes out to all the Sindhi frontliners as well for putting themselves out there and for picking up our calls to advise or reassure us despite how busy they are. As well to all the frontliners and government officials of Indonesia, I salute all of you. You are the true heroes. Now, coming back to this episode, we are going to explore how our mind, body, and relationships are interrelated in shaping our mental health and physical well-being. We will also be diving into a conversation that links culture and trauma and talk about the necessary steps that we need to take to nurture our healing and reduce collective anxiety. The person I'm so excited to introduce today and have this conversation with is none other than Deepika Mulchandani. Deepika is one of the few mental health practitioners in our community who is well-versed in family and systemic therapy. She provides a trauma-informed approach to the persistent mental health challenges we see in our communities and organizations today. With this as an area of her expertise, Deepika believes that our embodied brains heals within safe relationships, a space where we are witnessed, supported, and offered compassion for the entirety of our human experience. Welcome, Deepika. I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I am equally excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to do this as well. So I know it has been delayed for a bit, but I'm really happy to be able to finally do this with you. So, yes. And thanks for having me as well. Yes. Yeah.
Definitely. I'm so excited to go down and dive down on the topics of mental health as well as trauma that is not so often discussed in our community. Yes. Just to let everybody know as well about how we came across each other. Basically, Deepika connected with me after watching my podcast with Anjali. Yeah. And she said, it was my first time talking to her as well. And I was already immediately inspired by the work that she does. And I was so grateful actually at that point of time she contacted me, because I was also looking at seeking sort of help in my personal sort of growth and in my own journey of self-development. And when she reached out to me, I immediately got really inspired, and I wanted to connect with her and know more about the work that she does. And she said also that she wanted to really contribute to Wandamals and to the community on her area of expertise. Yeah. So yeah, Deepika, why don't you tell everybody first a little bit more about yourself before we move on into the topic?
Yeah. Who am I? Okay, so I was wondering what to say in this portion because it's such a big question. And I think the just like you, grew up in Jakarta, grew up in our Sindhi community, studied there. I think the one maybe difference, or one thing that was a bit different about the experience, was going to an international school. So I had very early exposure to lots of different kinds of people. And lots of different kind of things. And also my mom being someone from Singapore, she was very big on education. So she was like, academic was such a huge thing. Good thing is I like it. I don't like exams, but I like to study. So it worked out okay for me. And I had a lot of things that I wanted to do, a lot of things that I wanted to to plans and stuff for my own life, basically, since I was very young. So I think that led me to future decisions along the way. But otherwise, the childhood was quite similar. Jakarta, Sindhi community, figuring life out, figuring school out, figuring plans out. And I think at that time when, education was not such a priority like it is today, that was one thing that I struggled with as well, as I grew up. But that kind of shaped how I chose my life going forward and all the education pathway that came after that. So, and I'm a middle child of 3 siblings. And I have an older sister. I have a younger brother who's 10 years younger than me. So he came way later. And that was a sibling rivalry thing. I didn't take his permission to share, so except for this part of it. So that's the short of my story. But if you want to ask more questions, Girish, I'm happy to answer you on that.
Definitely. Let's go and talk about the work that you actually do and what sort of grew your passion into healing. You are also what is the exact term to define the job that you do? Is it a body-based psychotherapist?
Yes.
Maybe you want to explain a bit more to our viewers, what does that mean, and the process that you sort of practice for your patients.
Yeah.
Do I call them patients, or do I call them? I wouldn't call them patients, right? Or
clients. Clients is better.
Clients, yes.
I just call them people, but clients work, I think.
People, yeah.
Yeah. I think going back to how it started, to answer your first question, about 15 years ago when I was 20, so you can guess my age, yeah. So I went to Sydney, and I went for I don't know how I got into it, to be honest, but it was a counseling course that I was a part of. And that actually changed my mind about all these, how do we treat people? How do we treat each other? Because I stumbled in that class. I had a lecturer who was a clinical psychologist who I interned with later. And the first class, right, Girish, like 1 hour of that class was spent for us students to group into 3 to just listen to each other. And first I was like, what am I going to talk about? I seem like nobody connects with our stress, right? We just go, what are we going to talk about? So I was only 20. I was like, okay, I'll talk. And I realized there's so much to talk about. There's so much, to share. And the key thing is when people actually listen to you, when people actually are paying attention to you, and there is something about that changes your body, that changes your nervous system, that whole safe relationship, in the introduction that you shared just now. That whole process of having a safe space to talk, to connect, actually brings up so much of interesting things in us and shifts us to a sense of safety. So, to define my work, I truly believe in this process. We'll talk more about the chronic pain thing, which I think, we will talk more about later. But that was such a definitive point as well for me, because I realized that unless our body is with us in therapy, because a lot of therapy focuses on cognitive, I realized when I was first studying. We just talk, we find out your irrational beliefs. But what I realized is if your body is not with you, you're just talking. And maybe you have tools and maybe you have things you can do. But how do you bring the body into therapy? How do I bring the body into our face-to-face? So that is a different skill set that I went on to pursue because of my own story, honestly. Because of my own recovery story from fibromyalgia. I went to pursue this whole study on trauma, which led me to this word embodiment, body-based. So I added the body-based to the psychotherapy, which is previously clinical, means more cognitive, more emotional processing, but not so much the body. So I kind of brought that in. And so when people ask, what do? I say, I talk with you, but your body is there too, because you're sensing it too in sessions. And that's how the healing happens. That's how the release happens, although you may not realize it there and then. So in short, that's the body-based part of it. And then the other part of my work is relationship, because that is so key. When we have relationships that are not the safest, we struggle. We struggle to be ourselves. We struggle to feel accepted and, completely seen as a person. So that too has an impact on mental health. So that is the family systems part of it. So 2 things combined, body-based and relationship.
That's super interesting, Deepika. I think in my last podcast as well, with Anjali, I touched upon the topic about how we as human beings can become a computer program based on our past experience, our trauma experiences that we sort of sometimes don't even realize we experience growing up, right? And by the age of a certain age of like 35 years old, it's really hard to change this program and you know, and understand really that your mental, the mental state you are in can actually directly affect your physical health. And this is super interesting because you said you cured yourself from an autoimmune disease called fibromyalgia, right? I think my mom also went through somewhat something like that, but I think her own personal journey with that, she went through a range of doctors who did not even know what sometimes what to do or what medicines to give, because it's such a unique disease that you can't really know exactly how or when is the right time to cure it as such. So do you want to share with everybody about how you yourself cured yourself out of this disease without any conventional medicine practices?
Yeah. I think I'll give some context on how this it's a condition that is diagnosed by ruling out, which means if they test somebody with fibromyalgia, the test will actually be completely nothing. And that is the crazy part about it. Because if you go to the doctor, they do your blood test, urine test, radiology, all of the scans, it doesn't show for anything. All you have is pain, and it looks different for everybody. So your mom might have completely different symptoms from me, for example. So for me, it was chronic pain I can't explain, just all throughout the body. And then brain fog was the worst because I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't focus in anything. Like if you're talking to me, I'll be elsewhere because I'm focused on my body and my body pain. And it is also triggered by food as well. It's also triggered by various kind of stress. Basically, anything that triggers your body into stress can flare up all kinds of symptoms. So that is the broad diagnosis of fibromyalgia, right? So when I first started, I, like your mom, went to various doctors. They said it's all in your head. There's not enough oxygen flow in your brain. I got those kind of things from the doctors. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this, right? Until I went to Singapore and I went to this pain care clinic. And this doctor is a pain care specialist. So he was able to say, use this word fibromyalgia. And I'm like, but what is it? If the tests are clear, what is it? He says, oh yeah, you know, your nervous system is a bit sensitive to things. So it flares up. So here's some medication and just reduce stress and exercise. So very generic advice, right? Now, if I tell you, okay, Girish, go and reduce your stress, where do you start? How does it work? It is so it is so generic. People use it all the time. Oh, don't stress. Oh, don't stress. I'm like, yeah, can you, now that I understand stress better, I'm like, okay, we need to really break stress down, you know, so that it's effective when you say don't stress, you know, and how do you start? So that was the first thing. Anyway, I tried exercising and I took the meds. So I thought it's a purely medical condition, right? So take meds, exercise. And exercise was hard for me, Girish, because the next day I would be in further pain. So to go back to the gym was such a nightmare because I would feel good for a while, but the next day the pain comes back and I can't wake up as easily. So, but anyway, things got better. And then I stopped the medication in a year and I relapsed when I started my master's, which is 3 years later, with all the stress, with all the pressure. And I was in a very difficult relationship at that point in time, all of that together, and I relapsed. And this is when the whole, I was like, you know what, this really needs to be solved for. And the first glimpse of hope was when I read the word fibromyalgia in my journal articles, because I was doing my assessments. So I was reading all these papers and I saw the word there and I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just a medical issue. It is also psychological. Hence, the medication is also not purely medical. It's also for your psyche, for your nervous system balance, you know? So I was like, you know, it was like a bit of hope, but it was just the beginning. It was just the beginning. I was still I had memberships in everything, Girish, TCM, acupuncture, massage center. I had membership in all of that, you know, just to maintain symptoms, because there is no disease actually. It's literally symptoms like pain, headache, brain fog, all of that. So I was doing all kinds of symptom management until, you know, it was intuition, honestly, I don't know, yeah. I said, do yoga. And this time the yoga studio belongs to a friend of mine in Singapore. And I told him, you know what? Oh, and I read this blog, which I want to share, which is so interesting. There was this lady who had fibromyalgia. She's from the US. She wrote a blog and she says this, she said, you know what? When you have a condition like this or any kind of condition, you want to fight it. You should be familiar with this, right? You want to fight it. You want to get rid of it because it's so uncomfortable. And I was in the same spot. I was just so uncomfortable. I need to get this out of my body. That was my spirit, you know, the same. I want to get this out. This has to stop this is ridiculous. I can't be paying this much money on all my memberships. This is ridiculous. So all that kind of thing. But then, she said the most beautiful thing in her blog, and she says, start to accept where your body is. If you can't do a particular pose, forget it. If you can, do it. Stretch, but stretch with awareness. Whatever it is that you're doing, do it with presence of mind, do it with awareness, and just do what you can. So when I went to my friend's yoga studio, I told him this, I said, I don't want to be adjusted. I just want to do yoga in the corner. I'll follow you, but don't touch and adjust, because yoga can be taught in so many different ways as well. But I was very insistent that I would like to just do it on my own and let it be a more deeper healing journey for myself. I had no words. I was just all intuition. And 2 months into that, 3 to 4 times a week of that, medication stopped. Now, I'm not saying it will work for everybody, because everybody's body is different. So I'm going to be very clear about this, because a lot of people, after I wrote an article about this, they're like, oh, is this what I'm supposed to do? I'm like, no, we have to assess your body first. So it's not one size fits all. But for me, it worked that way. So 2 months into it, medication stopped. Until now, it's been more than 4 years, 0 medication. And I'm not as diligent with yoga as I was back then even, and it's still okay. And it's a lot of lifestyle management. And, the deeper part of it is emotional processing, if I'm honest. Like I said, I was in a very difficult relationship. Like, I spent a lot of time on the healing thing that, you said you're into. So was I. And so I'm still, we're processing this. And of course, I have a very good support system. I have excellent people around me. And it is really releasing, understanding, and integrating all of these stories into my life within safe relationship, therapeutic and friendships, of which I have a lot of really awesome friends around me. So, all this informed how I practice. I'm like, no, this is how mental health should be practiced. So I'm really committed to spreading this. And hence I reach out to you for this too, to share a very different kind of message around healing, around chronic mental health issues, including anxiety, autoimmune, fibromyalgia, etc. Yeah, very long answer to your question.
Okay. No, definitely. When you brought up and you said, you've been trying to fight out the emotions or trying to get rid of the emotions. I think to give some context to the viewers as well, in the last 6-7 months, in the pandemic, especially, when I've been more into the sort of journey of personal self development, I've been doing more meditation routines. I've been working out a lot more, being more mindful with my eating. It's actually also seeing what the mainstream media is saying about health and wellness. Sometimes also, all these posts that you see on Instagram, for example, all these health and wellness posts, it's just non-stop now at the moment, right? The quotes you see. Sometimes when I dive too much into it as well, making me want to do these routines that is quite important for me, sort of makes me feel that something is wrong with me, right? I think the line that would be, the sentence that would be right is that we've been limited in our creative expressions as a community, because sort of generating so much anxiety to attempt the new, or to attempt these routines, or to attempt, the spiritual awakening as such, right? To be out of the box as such. And I feel like the more I've become familiar with my own self and my own body, the more I'm having, thoughts or realizing about my symptoms, like, for example, my sinus issues as such, right? And that's why I reached out to you, and I was like, I have all these emotions coming out of me now, which I used to always suppress growing up, not really know how to really feel, and understanding the importance of having to feel these emotions. But it's about how do we do it now, right? And that's why I reached out to you. So so I reached out to you because I don't want to fight sort of, and then sort of Deepika told me not to get rid of these feelings, but sort of work with them to benefit your own body and to create that alignment between your mind and body, right? So Deepika, would you say that a lot of this, symptoms that we have, like, for example, my sinus, the fibromyalgia, headaches, for example, and other diseases, would you say that stress is the number one cause for these diseases? Emotional suppression, causing these stress, causing these genes in our body to produce different proteins that causes these symptoms to exist in our body.
I think the part to understand here is how trauma works. I mean, we'll go into a description of that. Now, all these things. Now, if you go to a medical doctor, they will tell you something else, right? They will tell you based on their medical knowledge. But because my reference is trauma literature, I'm very deep into trauma work, trauma informed, trauma skilled, that whole terminology. From this perspective, what happens to us is our nervous system has a baseline, right? So let's say we have an incident where we see something bad. So then we get scared, obviously, right? This one goes up. Now, if we were not sufficiently calm or regulated, then and this has to be plenty of experiences. We are very resilient, but if we have a lot of experiences like that, our baseline goes up. So something that might not scare person A can scare person B, because the baseline goes up. The hyperarousal and the anxiety is higher in this person. Why? Because it's not about the incident. Because I mean, we all face so many things on a regular basis, right? We are actually resilient, but when we are not sufficiently attended to, when we feel alone in many experiences in our lives, especially when we are very young, in our early childhood, before 5 years old, even prenatal, according to research now. So our nervous system actually gets altered. We are always changing and shifting. It alters our nervous system, which alters our immune system. So we are always rewiring. Even our brain neural network is always rewiring based on that processes. And that is actually what happens. So things like sinus, fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia, for example, is my nervous system going from baseline okay to baseline as quite hyper. Means very fight energy, but also freeze energy, because I can't do anything about the pain. So it's stuck in the body, it's trapped in the body. And why? I mean, the more I was releasing it, the more stories came to my mind. Oh, this happened, that happened, that happened. And that's how you integrate it, you see. That's how you integrate the issues, the pain, and the stories. And this is where it needs a safe release. And it needs to be doing in our own pace and time. So I'm not the person who is for like very quick fixes. I'm personally not for it, because scientifically it doesn't prove to be very useful. And even on an intuitive level, it's not very safe for people to do it so quickly, because our body also needs to rest in between. It also needs to enjoy life in between, So there is also that. So I think if you're asking me, what is this? This is actually nervous system that has altered baseline. Now it will look different in everybody. So for me, it was fibromyalgia. For you, it was other health issues, sinus being one of them. And for someone else, it could be autoimmune manifestations, skin issues, eczema, these allergies and these kind of things. But if I had to just simplify, it's the nervous system and immune system and endocrine hormone system that has gone completely awry, because stress in the past has not been regulated. So now that we are facing COVID, we are even more heightened, right? We are already baseline up. Now it's gone higher. Now for those who didn't have too much of these experiences, maybe they can manage okay, but others really struggle through this process. Because our Sindhi community is very interesting, which we can talk about later, because we are a dislocated group of people. We are not in our homeland. We have traveled so far to make a life. So there's a lot of stress in our parents' body, I would imagine, because they had to completely shift in danger, right? It was so, the whole war thing in India, Pakistan there. And then they moved in very precarious situations, which means that they already carried that with them. And whatever they didn't process, whatever anxiety they didn't process, it all just keeps coming down to us in our epigenetics. So there's also a study on that. So you can imagine by the time it comes down to us, and if we are not taking charge of our well-being, means all of this is on us. So that's what's happening. And these are all symptoms that you were asking about, what are all these things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's quite similar to work of a famous doctor and international lecturer I like to follow. His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I know I've spoken to you about him.
Yeah.
And he spoke about how our brain does not know the difference between the experience in the past that took a screenshot of the emotions that you felt, and by thinking about that experience alone. Yeah. So, for example, if a trauma happened to you growing up at that moment, especially at an age of under 10 years old, you do not know how to process these emotions. So it immediately enters your subconscious brain and becomes a part of you, right? And then at the age of 25 or 26, and you see an event, something happens in the external environment, that you may not even realize or remember that it affected you during your childhood, comes back and sort of gives you that sense of fear or anxiety, especially in your stomach area, that those butterflies as such, and not having to understand why this feeling of anxiousness happened to you, right? Just because your brain doesn't know the difference. So does that mean that if you can experience stress and sort of you can experience like dis-ease or symptoms because of not being able to handle past emotions, does that mean you can also cure it just by visualizing an experience that has not happened yet? The same way teaching your brain to think of an experience that has not happened yet by bringing an elevated emotions of like joy and happiness, and sort of that's sort of journey to healing, right? Would you agree with him?
Yeah, I think I am a big believer that there is no one size fits all. So I am very, very hard and fast on it, only because I know that our human systems are very complex. So one thing that might work for you. So that's why I said with coaches, take it if it fits you. That's always what I say. If it fits you, if you go, oh, that worked. Like yesterday I was doing another recording and she was talking about kidney breathing. It wouldn't work for me, but it worked for her. So I was like, okay, good. So this is very important to note. And that's why being a psychotherapist, I'm a bit more mindful because I work with very diverse groups of people. And I know, some people, Girish, like I've worked in a therapeutic group home in Singapore. So these are girls, teenage girls with very early life trauma, everything from sexual trauma to physical trauma of all kinds. So if I had to tell them to visualize joy, I know it wouldn't work. Why? Because their body system has been too compromised into either hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So to even come to a reasonably balanced state to visualize the good things would be quite tricky for them. You see, so that will be that. But for other people who have more support system around them, who have maybe more meditative practice in their intergen, like my grandma was a big meditator, so I learned from her of how to stay calm, how to breathe. She would always say, wake up in the morning for 20 minutes, sit down, and breathe, and very spiritual woman. So I had that gift from her, you see, like I had that transfer from her that taught me, okay, you know what, even if life is hard, always be grounded. And the relationship with her was very healthy as well. She was very, one of the most amazing person in my life, right? She's passed away, but very beautiful person. So she transferred that. So if you feel like, if you visualize joy, then it could be that for you, your body, it settles. And you can actually move your nervous system to a more calm state by doing that. And you could alter your brain. I would be sending cautious, not to say don't do it, but do it with awareness. And the biggest key in my world for healing is interoception is the word, is to really learn how to be with yourself. And then the tools will come. These are all tools, right? Like visualization, breathing, dancing, yoga. Not everybody's going to do yoga, right? Someone's going to do something else. So it's tools. And once you know how to be with yourself, you can choose your tools.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the pandemic itself has given us that opportunity to learn and become familiar with ourselves and to be ourselves. I personally, I'm not used to this life of being at home or being in the office as such in front of my computer. I'm an outgoing, I like to travel a lot with my business and be on the floor and get creative around the food that I create with my team. So, but coming to the pandemic, it has really taught me how to be more familiar with myself. And sometimes I'm not seeing the things I want to see because, as you said, it's not for everybody to be able to visualize joy, for example. And I try as much as I meditate and do creative visualization. Sometimes the thoughts that come in my head is not the ones that I want to see, right? But it's about not judging them. It's about just being curious about them. Absolutely. So despite, having this pandemic sort of the fear and anxiety coming onto us, as much as we try to be grateful or we, have these practical steps to keep us grounded, sometimes it just gets like tiring and exhausting as well. Especially, when there's so much going on around in the community who needs the medical resources, who needs the support as well. And, as much as you don't want to focus your energy to it, you are bound to be affected by what's going on around you, right? So what are the sort of practical steps that you can give for us, individuals at home, especially dealing with such anxiety and fear in the community, especially.
Yeah, I think, there's no, again, same thing, one size fits all. I think this whole statement of it's okay not to be okay has become really popular in this pandemic. People are, from the psychology field, we are just telling people, it's okay if you are not like up there. It's okay if you feel slightly dysregulated. So that's permission to self is first. Second is, I think we really need to, interestingly, more of my clients, who are dealing with family is actually firming up our boundaries as well, like, being too exposed to these WhatsApp groups that constantly gives you all kinds of information. Like, I was very strict with my mom, I said, can you stop it already? Otherwise I will disconnect. I told her that I'm going to disconnect from you if you don't stop sending all this, because our brain can't handle that much. Like I said, I'm much more aware of my body. I have fibromyalgia as a history, right? So I know I have a hyperarousal tendency. So if I keep consuming stuff like this, means I'm not respecting where my body is at and for what purpose. And that will also compromise your immune system if you keep doing that, because you're adding, your brain stress is going ridiculous. Like it's just going in a loop. So having those boundaries, limiting the kind of news you consume, limiting what you consume, that will be one of the most practicals. And just tell people around you, like, stop it, otherwise I will disconnect. And it's a joke. You can make it funny. You don't have to be rude, right? With people you love, you can just say, enough now, cut it. And that in turn helps my mom, for example, right? Who is also very hyper aroused. Yeah, she also has the same baseline, which is quite upregulated. So I'm like, you see, this is really harmful if we keep doing this. So I'm educating her a little bit as well. So I think we really need to start to talk to people with education and say, don't do this, it's harmful. And it will work with some, won't with others. And the other part of regulating, I think, is, find one thing. Grounding has been really useful. I feel like I've shared this because I facilitate a parents group in Indonesia. So I share these resources and they tell me that it's been useful for them. So there's this thing called grounding. If you go to YouTube and you look for Emotion Aid by Gina Ross, you will see that she has given very practical steps on just scaling your stress and just grounding. So butterfly, a tap is just one way of it. And she's given like 5 tools, so people can pick and choose from it. So you can YouTube it after this and Google Emotion Aid, Gina Ross. So that's one way of really connecting with your body and really making it very, very simple. Like this lockdown has also affected this recent one has taken a toll on me as well, because I keep hearing clients with families who are unwell, who are sick, one thing or the other. So I'm like, if you can just do one thing. Actually, this is 3P. Maybe I'll share it here as well, which I told the parents in my group. I said, find one thing that gives you pleasure, even if it's something like eating a nice cup of a cake or nice food or whatever, just one thing that gives you a sense of power and control over your life. Maybe exercise, or it's just a walk, or if it's just something like I have adopted a cat recently, even it's just taking care of her, taking care of her, that. And the other is nurturing your pain. I'm so not for the idea of fixing pain. I'm for the idea of like, okay, I'm not feeling good. If I need to cry, I will. If I need to lock myself in the bathroom and just scream a little bit, I will. I'm going to allow space for emotions. And I think this is where some people are very afraid of their emotions. So I'm aware of that. People are like, I don't know, what if I cry too much, too long? People are always afraid of containing emotions. So this is where, again, it goes back to trauma. But if you can, then give space for that as well. So those 3 Ps have been useful for that group. So I'm sharing it here. So pleasure, power, pain, just 3 things. Keep it simple, keep it small, and realize that, you are being gifted with life. Your breath is a gift. You're still breathing. We are all still breathing, because someone else died. Of course, we can grieve. I'm not against grieving. It's important to grieve. And the flip side of that is realizing I still have a life and I can still enjoy it and I can make it very simple for myself. And I think this pandemic has really pushed us all to the brink, right? It has really pushed us, like, our resilience to the brink. And if we can just connect with the fact that we are humans and we are breathing and we are alive, very basic, I think we're doing well already. So that would be my thought.
I think I agree. I think for myself, if I have to share my experience and how I deal with this, was definitely grounding was something I learned as well. So every morning, like after my workout, as such. I just go walk barefoot, for example, and just connect, right? They say, right? For example, as much as I'm trying to understand why am I doing it sometimes, but it is nice. It is nice to reconnect and have that sort of, build upon a routine, even though you're not going to the office or you're not doing your travels, the usual stuff that I do. I try to make a routine at home for myself, as well, following Anjali, my previous host, advice to have a routine and to ground yourself, to be grateful, to journal more as well. And yes, I completely agree now with all the WhatsApp forwards that we're getting, especially I get upset with my parents and my family as well, to post unnecessary content on WhatsApp that could not sort of, that as much as it's quite, maybe it's fake, maybe it's not fake, but create that sense of anxiety or put your awareness into something that you don't want to happen to you. Because what I've learned as well is that where you put your awareness is where you put your energy, right? So I personally have stopped watching the news. I don't talk about the numbers and the cases again anymore on a day-to-day basis, only until it's related to my work. I try to avoid all the WhatsApp content that I get, and I try to educate my family as well in the need to post. But as much as I do that, I can't stop. And I completely agree that I think we should seek help when we want to, and especially a lot of us are sitting at home not knowing who to talk to, not meeting our friends. We're such social beings usually, especially us Sindhis. We love to go out and meet each other, right, and talk and just connect. And the fact that we don't get to do that, it's also quite painful. So I think seeking the support, and I'm really glad I reached out to you as well as to understand how I could deal with my emotions and how I could sort of grow in this journey of healing as well. So I'm so grateful for the last couple of sessions again, and I'm very sure I'm going to continue my work with you, and I'm so excited of what's yet to come as well. So Deepika, let's quickly move on into cultural norms, and it's linked to trauma as well, right? Especially in a culture where for often we're told growing up, that, for example, you shouldn't be. We're sort of pulled away back from being to express our true integrity or true nature of ourselves. Right. I'm not just saying it's the Sindhi community as such. It could be the Indian community as well. When we compare to the Western, when how we are more free in our mind and our body, I think, or been given the freedom of choice at a much younger age than compared to our Sindhi community, right? How do you think that has an effect for children, especially, or people in their teens growing up into understanding the trauma as well?
I think we come from a collective culture, so that's collective versus individualist, which is the West. And I struggled with this when I was in Australia, because I was like, oh, can I not go back? This is so nice, and because there was that, what you said, that space of expression, of freedom. And I was quite insistent that I wanted life to look a particular way. It took a lot of courage, in all honesty, to take the route that I have taken. Means I had to put up with a lot of disagreements. I do naturally have a very rebellious thing. It's in me. So but it was still hard. It was still stressful, still hard. So I think we need to now, in the day and age we are living in, with the kids, with the teens, like parents, right, need to really strike a balance between maintaining family values, but also within that family values, make space for dialogue and conversations with children and teens, as to what it is that they want and what it is that makes sense to them. And the freedom given needs to be sufficient for them to be able to express themselves. And I think for those of us who didn't have it, like you said earlier, we became very inhibitory. That's what I sense as well from our community, like there is this big fear of doing something new, of trying something new, of exploring, not that people don't do it, they do it, but it comes with such fear. It comes with such a big degree of uncertainty. And in my view, that is trauma, because I think, like, if we go back to the dislocation, right, from India, we had to move. I think what happened was, our parents got very protective of us, and they got very protective of our culture. which means, oh, don't
Yeah.
mingle too much. Otherwise, because we all have to huddle together because it's dangerous, because we're in a foreign land. Actually, from a physiological perspective, it makes sense to do that. But I think it got too much, the protection, everybody has to be together. And like I said, for me, the difference was I was in an international school. So my friends were so diverse from very, very young. So I was like, always, but why? Very questioning, why do we need to huddle together? It's so much more fun. And so I had that kind of thing, but I realized everybody's raised differently, right? Like everybody's, like my mom is from Singapore, so she was more multicultural in her exposure. And she was working as well before she got married. So that made a huge difference as to how she educated her daughters, like her, us, my sister and I. But anyway, coming back to that I think is that, is like, it's this whole protecting thing. It's this whole like, oh, don't do, because if you go, then actually underneath is fear, right? Underneath is fear of losing, right? Okay, if you do too much, or if you go too far, then I'm going to lose you, and that's going to be such a big tragedy, for the family, for parents. So I think this is the one we really need to address. We need to be honest that, actually the world is changing. We can't stop globalization. We are already there. We can't stop connection. So we better have a very much more open space to talk to the kids now as to what is it that they want, what is it that they want to explore. Sexuality is another big deal, which I think our community hasn't addressed very well. Oh, like, yeah, it is all like, not very addressed. So, I mean, these are the things we need to start to look at, to get honest about. Might as well start dealing with it squarely. Otherwise, what happens is the relationship become very sour, and also the relationship within the community becomes very sour because we are not accepting people. Like I remember if we were talking 15 years ago, I would only know you as son of queens. That's all. Means I don't know you with any more than that. Imagine, right? How isolated are we that I only know you as that. And then you will also be protecting yourself, right? Like, oh, I'm son of Girish. I have to be this. So I grew up like that, I very much. So probably you too. We are not that far apart in age. So this needs to be addressed squarely if we really want to, be more open as a community, to be more healing, more reparative, to give people more options, more freedom, and address the anxiety, that anxiety that's in the body. I see it in the teens as well, because it just gets transferred. Like they want to try, but they're scared. They want to try, but they're not as confident, so they also need to deal with the same anxiety. And getting help, getting support should be the norm by now. It really should be a norm, especially after this COVID situation. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think
no, you did. I've always been known as Anaknya Queens. You're right, absolutely, and they saved my number as Girish Queens as well, without even wanting to know my surname as such, right? But you know what? It's a lot easier said than done as well, and I personally went through it as well, and thankfully over the recent months in the pandemic, especially, I've been connecting even more with my family and trying to understand my roots as well, and my relationship with them, and touch wood, it's now better than ever, right? But there's a lot of people in our community, for example, who struggle with this relationship, not just with their parents, for example, with their husbands as well, or their wives as such, and have always been told to suppress their emotions. That fear is instilled upon them, not to speak up, not to voice out. And as much as we want to speak up or voice out our opinions, you can't change the other party. You cannot change their mindset sometimes, right? Because as we touched this upon in my last podcast as well, they also went through abandonment issues, moving in as immigrants as well, and they also grew up without having any sort of resources, right? But we are coming in as a generation of being at least aware of trauma, of healing, of the need to release emotions so that we are mentally and physically well as well, right? But how is it that for somebody to actually process this on a day-to-day basis, to actually understand that even though you cannot change the other person, what do you need to do as an individual? How do you go through that process? Seeking support is one thing, yes, but but you can't really change the outcome at the end of the day, right?
Yeah. I mean, if we are talking from the whole family systems, that whole theory, I'm just borrowing ideas from there. Even one person coming in and making some shifts, right? Even in boundaries. I think you shared a little bit with me as well. Like one person creating some boundaries. I did it with my parents too. I'm like, it was hard. It was hard, but I had a support system for myself. And at least
Yeah.
one person should be there in your corner who gets it. That's first. And then if one person starts to make the change, then there will be some impact. I'm not saying it'll be perfect and it could go any which way, but at least there is a new kind of input and voice in that system, in that relationship, in that community, in that circle, whatever the context is over here.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you start to get a different input, things maybe you can slowly start to move. Yeah, it's difficult to
Yeah.
change the older people who are not into it, but I think as younger people, honestly, I was also doing is very similar content not too long ago. Is the best thing we can do for ourselves is start to develop these firmer boundaries. Is start to realizing that what is okay with us, what is not okay with us, and this is easier for us with resources. I will be honest about that. It's easier for us with resources to do that, to say, we want to live like this, so we create that space for ourselves, and then we educate, and hopefully the parents are open-minded and there's hope for some change, right? Which has happened in my case as well, happened in your case as well. And these are the shifts. Even though it's small, it's a shift, it's a movement, and we can only expand from there. And this is what I like about the both of us doing this is, these are the kind of conversations we need to be having with each other. I mean, this is over a podcast, right? This is over one recording. But imagine if we can do this in our own safety nets, with our own friends group. I still see it in the 20s-year-old, like there's still this self-protective thing, and I'm like, oh God, stop it now. I get so irked. Stop it, enough. But I can see this is all being transferred across generations as well. So it's good. Like even a conversation like this, like what you and I are having now, I'm getting to know you as a person. You're getting to know me as a person. If we start doing this in our families, in our small friend circle, means we are creating more safety nets in our community. This is I know it's a big order. It's a very tall order. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's so needed. I mean, not too long ago, I was in touch with a teenager who said, it's so hard to have real relationships, and I'm like, it's so hard to be yourself. Because we are always, and that is really stressful for your mental health. So parents who are going to listen to this, right? Like my encouragement is to be courageous parents, like people like my age are parents now, probably your age as well, be courageous parents to say, it has to stop with us. This trauma, this anxiety, this image, it has to stop somewhere. It has to stop somewhere. And I made that decision for myself. I said, this is all not for me. Hence, you asked me, who are you? I've never met you. I'm like, yeah, I've been in hiding. I've been in hiding because I was trying to figure things out.
No.
So I mean, I have the I had the privilege of studying all this. So I consider myself lucky in many ways. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to share, exactly this, because I'm okay, at least I can start talking. At least you can start talking. Okay, we have one conversation rolling. Good.
Correct. And an example I want to give as well to the viewers at home, especially when it comes to my own personal experience, like I've always had, personally, I've always had abandonment issues. I'm not afraid to say it, okay? Sure. I've always had that fear of rejection, have abandonment issues. And I just tried to become more aware of why this was the case, right? So as I became more familiar with my past, with some of the work that, we did as well, and my other healer, for example, sort of made me realize, like growing up, I've had these moments that was obviously not at the intention of the bad intention of my parents, or as such that I was being left out of events, for example, or left alone in the car for a while, or I got lost like in a mall when I was traveling with my family in Japan. And I was always this little kid who felt like, oh, my mom had 2 boys already, and this third one is just being led around to mingle everywhere alone, right? And as much as now looking back at it, it doesn't bother me, but somehow it became a part of me, because at that point growing up, the process in my brain as such was that, oh, my parents left me, my parents abandoned me as such, right? Even though I know there's no intention as such. And the more I became aware of it now about these abandonment issues, I decided that, okay, I needed to let this heal, or sort of make it work for me, right? I cannot just not speak about it with my mom. So I decided to actually have the initiative, like you said, create that safety net and start talking on a day-to-day basis with my mom about this. And she was like, I was like, Mom, like I've always wanted to be independent as such now, maybe in the future move out and this and that. And I was like, why am I feeling this way? She was like, you know what? I've never had the intention of abandoning you. I just wanted you to be independent growing up. When I'm at this point, I'm trying to seek sort of my independence or like want to be independent, where in fact, my whole life, my mom has always taught me how to be independent. So sometimes you just create an illusion in your mind or that fear or that, something is wrong with you, that you've had these abandonment issues that often it's not true. So when you actually speak to them, it sort of heals that relationship between the two of you, and you can move and you can bring that with you in a good way and move on in your life.
Yeah, exactly. Because as a child, our perception is quite simplistic, right? It's very nonverbal. So if you get left somewhere, your body's scared. You're really like, oh, I'm alone, because you lose your attachment figures, right? Your parents.
Yeah.
So the perception can become like, oh, I'm left out. And maybe some words have been said unintentionally that made you feel like that. So you just join the dots, right? Your brain. And like you said, I agree with you. Our parents are not intentional. They didn't have the resources we have. They were doing their best in the best way how, but possibly caused some psychological pain unintentionally. Same thing with me, like didn't mean to. I had to struggle really hard to do what I want to do in life. So there was a lot of, this struggle and these seeming battles, where then I realized when I'm much older now that the intention was different. The intention was to protect. The intention was to support, but it came across in a way that was very painful. So it does cause psychological pain, but it's not from a space of, harm. So like you said, if we start to have these conversations, then talking to my parents have been enlightening for me as well. Like this is what we thought. And then I said, and my exposure in Australia really changed my framework. That is definite. So I think they couldn't catch up to it as well. They're like, oh, what happened there? Like, because it changed so much. And I was like, no, and I'm studying counseling. And I was like, no, we have to be better people. This is not okay. Yeah. So they don't get it. They're like, what is this? What is she talking about? So there's all of this that if we start, I think we will get somewhere. But if we don't start, then we are still stuck, right? That's my view. Yeah.
Okay, no, it's quite amazing. If we have to sort of quickly just summarize what we spoke about, basically we understand that, all these past trauma experiences that we may have, all this trauma that we may have experienced in the past, even unintentionally as well, could have led us to suppress the emotions that lead into the dis-ease of our body or the symptoms as such that is coming out now. And if we don't understand how to, work with these emotions and fear or anxiety as such, or the lower energy vibrations, we call it, right? It may lead to further disrupting our physical well-being, right? Now, can we maybe move on into the solution? I mean, we spoke about having to set boundaries, seeking help as well, maybe going into therapy, maybe going into more grounding and meditation and that spiritual journey, right? But are there anything else that you want to share, maybe practical steps that we can do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think we covered it sporadically. Maybe I'll just bring it together. I think the key to mental balance, I would break it down into a few. First is having one thing for emotional regulation, right? Whatever practice that is, that suits us, whether it's grounding. For yoga works really nicely for a lot of people I work with. So that's been really something for them. And having some kind of practice that grounds us is important. So one, emotional regulation practice. And if we have to really simplify that, then it goes back to that 3P, like something that gives you pleasure, something that gives you power, and acknowledging pain to say it's actually there. It's very uncomfortable, extremely, but to have that space to say, actually I'm struggling and it's there, and this may need more help in going forward. So that's one. And the second is the relationship, and boundaries is big. Actually, Girish, one of the most challenging things in our culture, not just our Sindhi culture, also Asian, also Indian, is the boundaries bit. Why? Because the more we are enmeshed, enmesh is fused in our boundaries, our mental health is truly challenged. So when I work with people, that is one of the first areas in our culture. I say, tell me, how is it going in your family? What's happening there? Because the more there is that tension, it's very difficult to not have the stress. It's very difficult to not be triggered by the stress on top of the work stress, on top of the COVID stress, on top of the other stress that we are going through. And this is the area where a lot of people need support. This is why, relationship is a big area I work with, because people really need input in this area for sure. Doing it alone lacks in clarity. You get stuck.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah.
But if someone else gives you some insight, you can grow. So boundaries, emotional regulation. And if someone who has lived with persistent anxiety, a lot of us in our community have, I think because of our past, because of the whole migration, moving country, raising family, businesses in somewhere foreign, we have this persistent health anxiety, anxiety to do with death, chronic anxiety like what I had, which then manifested into pain. So this is an area which needs accurate support. This one, I think you can't tackle on your own, even though you have, but do the practice, do the emotional regulation, do that, have one thing that grounds you, meditate. But this is where we need each other. This is where we need safe relationship. And therapy is always a good place to start. I actually teach people how to co-regulate, because I learned to calm down in the presence of somebody I trust. And that's how my body actually learns how to calm down. And if I don't have that, it's hard to calm down on my own, because we are built like that. Our nervous system, this vagus nerve we have, which I think I've shared a bit with you, we're built like that. It's hard to calm down alone. You have to be really practiced and really supported for a long time to be able to do that. So I see therapy like that. Like I had a client ask me, like, why is this working? Why is the therapy process working? And my answer is because we are co-regulating, because I'm teaching you to calm down and you will learn how to calm down. So if you're at that level, then that is where mental health support, I think, should be really paramount, and the right kind of support, the one who understands trauma work as well. So that would be my encouragement. So 3 things: relationship boundaries, emotional regulation, and if it's chronic, if it's persistent, please get help. And we need to start owning that. And if you have parents, then, oh gosh, own it. Own it, so the kids are more regulated.
Though it's I completely agree with you. But again, with our parents, I think as much as we want to discuss the topic about conscious parenting, and how we need to be more mindful with the relationship between us and our parents, again, we cannot come across in that victim mindset as such, right? So we have to first, I think the first step before the 3 that you suggested earlier is actually to become aware that you need help. At least aware of these thoughts and these emotions that you are going through in your body. And I think when you are already aware and when you're more familiar with your own body and what it needs, you are already 10 steps ahead.
I like
and
that.
then you can move on into the seeking help from others as such, right? And seeking professional support, I feel.
Awareness is important. You're right, absolutely. And that's why exposure.
So I think it's been an amazing session today. I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast again. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about as well, as much as I'm going through a lot of healing with my own journey as well. And I do have a lot of fears and anxiety still in my body, and I'm trying to work with you, and I'm super happy with the work that you have done as well in the past couple of sessions as well. And I cannot, as I said, I cannot wait to take this journey forward and see what, and share hopefully to the viewers about my progress as well in the journey to healing. So Deepika, thank you so much for getting on board into Wandamals. And is there anything else you would like to say maybe at the...
I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for initiating this. This is such a courageous move and so important. And I had such a sense for it as well that, no, I think we need to get one conversation rolling, to help people see things differently. So thank you for initiating this, truly. And to the viewers, I think, the biggest hope is to just start conversations, just start opening the mind and start developing awareness, like you said. If you find yourself in our conversations, if you find yourselves in any of the messages, then start to take ownership. And when I said parents earlier, I meant the parents who are the younger parents now. You have so much control, so much power over how your kids turn out. So take courage to address that. Take courage to talk about it. I'm always happy to be contacted for things, open space to connect, to talk, and I love building communities that are healthier. I have the parents one running. That's hence I reach out to you. I'm advising for a mental health app because these it's just growing these healthier communities and see where we go from there. So I'm always happy to be reached out to. That would be the last.
That's amazing. Deepika, last thing, where can the viewers find you and about you and your work, and how can they connect with you? Do you want to share with everybody?
Yeah, the easiest would be the socials like Instagram, Facebook. My personal Instagram is Deepika Mulchandani. I have a company one, which is The Open Connections. Maybe you can share the name later. I'll share the details with you.
Yeah.
So if you go theopenconnections.com, Facebook, The Open Connections, or Instagram, The Open Connections, resources are there. Videos, some blogs, some articles, some previous podcasts. This one I'll post it as well once we're ready. So all of those stuff are over there. And there's a free introduction call that I give people who just want to talk and see, if this is for them, then I'm happy to schedule that in and also talk. And people who want to help communities and organizations talk about mental health, happy to be connected for that as well. So I'm quite open and to do work like this. So.
Yeah, and I think my last message to the viewers is that when we speak about mental health and how do we address and sort of balance our mind and body as such, is we are at an age where like Joe Dispenza said, we are at an age it's not enough to know, but to know how to get overcome these mental health challenges as such, right? Yeah. So thank you again one more time, Deepika, and I hope to see you soon. And if to all the viewers, thank you so much for tuning in this far. And I can't wait to share with you guys the upcoming episodes, even though I know there have been delays in the podcast releasing. Is probably because of the current situation where we are in. And I really like to do my podcast actually in person. Yes. But I hope to give you guys more content through online. And as always, please do not forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. And until next time, guys, see you soon.